When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm Oldish. Welcome to this episode of Oldish Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. We're happy to say today that we're celebrating the 3rd anniversary of Oldish, the podcast. The first full episode was in May of 2022. This is now May of 2025. So last time I checked, that's 3 years. We've been busy, surprisingly so. And it surprises me every time that we're still doing this, because 5 years ago, this wasn't on my list. And so I'm impressed. This is our 68th full episode. We've grown an audience slowly but surely. By the time anybody listens to this, we'll be somewhere in the vicinity of 8,000 downloads over the 3-year period of time. Download is approximately equal to somebody listened. So people are listening. People are responding to us. We've been listening to in over 60 countries and over 1,400 different cities around the world. Someone has downloaded the podcast to give it a listen. And so we feel like that's a pretty good audience. And we started off with just us. And the first 2 or 3 episodes were mostly us and people we knew. And now I'm pretty sure that most of the people who are listening are people that we don't know in person. We've come to know some people. Several people have written reviews on our website, and we've reached out to thank them for that. And a couple of them have ended up coming on to the podcast to talk with us. And we're going to be talking in the future with some more of those folks. So that's great. So how do you feel, Janet?
Greg, isn't this amazing? 3 years. And like you said, 5 years ago, it wasn't even a sparkle in our eyes, a twinkle in our eyes. I'm humbled by hearing those numbers and humbled by the fact that we've done this and humbled by how much it means to you and me to do this right, this oldish thing, this aging thing. And humbled that there's so many others out there that also want to figure this out and do this right and make aging into something that's meaningful for each of us and whatever that looks like.
Yeah, everybody's going through it. There are a lot of people who are responding to our notion that the old split between middle age and old has been modified. And now there's an intervening span of time where we're not as young as we used to be, but we're not old yet either.
Yeah.
There seem to be a lot of people have noticed that. A lot of people have commented to us and are bringing it to their attention that it's like that. We've talked to several authors who are basically saying the same thing, either in general or in varying aspects of what getting older looks like, and still being alive, still being vital, just older. So I think we have tapped into something that's real, and people have been responding to that. That's great.
I agree. And I'm thinking about when you and I first started conceptualizing this idea of a podcast about oldishness and how we wanted it to feel like we were having a conversation on our back porch and our friends and neighbors were stopping by for some tea or wine, and that we're talking We're just chatting about what is it like to be oldish and what does that look like? What are the highs? What are the lows? I know we talked about wanting to find our niche as far as we are part of the baby boomers. And so there's a lot going on out there right now for our age group and this developmental phase. So we wanted to not try to outdo the exercise focus, the vitamins focus per se, the kind of conscriptive, what should we do right to make this a really wonderful stage of our lives. It's being done. It's not that it's not important, but it's being done in many formats, books and podcasts and shows. So you and I talked about wanting to have a place for people to tell their stories and a place to have conversations. When I think about this 3-year anniversary, and by the way, everyone who's listening, we're sending you virtual balloons so you can be celebrating with us, and party hats, as I think about where we are in this 3-year anniversary. And I think about concrete ways that we are settling in to this experience, ways that I feel more comfortable in interviewing people and looking for books and poems and poetry that reflect this time in our lives. I've had another year of enjoying doing this with you, Greg, and what it means for our friendship that we can age together and help each other, walk each other home, as was one of the books that we reviewed this past year. So what a amazing experience to have at this point in my life.
Well, it certainly has been a treat for me to spend all these hours talking with you over these 3 years in a kind of more public way than just a friendship would be. It feels to me like it's really has deepened our friendship in ways that were not possible to anticipate. So I appreciate that. I feel like I know you a lot better than I did. And surprisingly, I didn't think I could like you more than I did. But 3 years later, I like you even more than I did then. I'm very happy about that.
Yes.
I'm happy. One of the things that I'm really happy about is that your friend Leslie has joined us periodically for the Oldish Book Club, and we have read some books together and talked about those books. And many of the books are books that I wasn't going to read those books. Our last book club meeting featured poems from a series of books by Judith Viorst and from her Decades series. I wasn't going to read those poems. And I feel like reading those poems made a big difference in how I was feeling and how I feel about things going forward, her attitude and so on. And having Leslie pick out that particular set of books and kind of design the way that we would talk about them. We didn't just sit back and do a review. We each read 3 of the poems and we talked about how those related to oldishness and what we're talking about. That really has enriched my life a lot. So, yeah, it's been a good ride.
What's been interesting for me is that during these 3 years of doing this podcast together, I have aged more in these 3 years. I've gone from very adamantly wanting to celebrate oldishness to recognizing things about aging that are scary and things about aging that I don't particularly like, and continuing to be able to have conversations about that with you, with the authors who have written books about aging that we've had the privilege of connecting with for an episode, are all healing for me as far as being on this journey, not having to be on this journey alone, and hearing how other people are thinking about it.
Yes, I agree. And one of the things that we have not been about is denialism of getting older. Our focus has continued to be, what's it like getting older anyway? What's it like being oldish? So when we have a guest on, it's like, how does it feel to be you these days? Turns out that it feels pretty good to a lot of people. When we ask people, as we usually do, in your oldishness, what are you most afraid of? And what are you most excited about in oldishness? We've had a very wide range of responses to that. And everybody, it seems like, was surprised that we asked them.
And kind of surprised to think about it. How often do any of us stop and think, at this moment, what am I most excited about as I'm aging? And in this moment, what am I scared of and worried about? And as we ask our guests these questions, and we're asking ourselves these questions, and hopefully it's encouraging all of you as you listen with us to stop and ask yourself that question along the way.
One of the things that I've been wondering about is in the first 2 years of our podcast, we talked about playing pickleball a lot.
Yes,
And
we
in
did.
the last year, not so much. So, and I didn't play today, which surprised me. So I'm actually playing a little bit less than I was. How about you? Are you still playing?
I haven't been playing for a few months. It's not because I'm not interested in pickleball anymore. It was a series of circumstances around, it was winter and finding a place inside to play and finding people to play with. I am assuming, expecting, planning for pickleball to be back in my life this summer. But yeah, I was thinking about that too, that pickleball, why do you think that was? That we talked about it so fervently and now it hasn't woven its way into a lot of the conversations recently?
Well, certainly it was a huge enthusiasm for us both. There was a while there where I was playing every day, and I feel like it really encapsulates we talk about not wanting to be prescriptive about getting older, but if we were going to be prescriptive, it would include things like get exercise, get outside, socialize with people, keep active, learn how to do something new, get better at something, many of those things. And we followed that prescription pretty well. So now we don't have to anymore. We're all good.
Exactly. Well, and as you were talking, I was thinking about some of the conversations we've had with friends, authors, and others. I don't know if there's any others besides that, each other, around things that are poignant and, again, maybe scary about aging. It makes me think of, it wasn't this year, but the year that we interviewed someone about long-distance grandparenting. And it was during the holidays. And all of us, you, me, and this guest, were all kind of lamenting the difficulties of that, grandparenting long distance. And it felt like I was being held a little bit in my own pain around that by talking about it together.
That remains one of our more popular episodes, talking with Denise about long-distance grandparenting, because the way our culture has evolved over the years, a lot of grandparenting is long distance. I feel like I'm very lucky that 2 of my daughters have chosen to live in New England, where I still live. But even that, it's like the closest of the 2 is almost an hour and a half away from where I live. And the other one is almost 4 hours away from where I live. So that's almost like, it takes an effort. It requires an effort to get there. My youngest daughter lives in California, and that requires a lot of effort. I just went out there last month, and that takes a lot of effort. And it also takes, I'm just going to throw this out there, because this is different now from what it was when we first started doing the podcast. It requires a functioning government to be able to do long distance travel, it turns out. So it was much harder. I experienced 2 delays in flying out to California and back, where the pilot came on and said, we're having problems with air traffic control, so we're being delayed. So come on, you guys. That's a big, big change when we first started doing this. It was still COVID. We still felt like there was a pandemic. Now people are thinking, oh, remember back in the COVID days? There were still lots of people getting sick. There are still lots of people dying, but we're not all freaked out about it. But back then, it was like I was still checking the statistics every day to see if I was still alive. And that has changed. And we had a government that was struggling with a huge worldwide crisis and taking positive steps. Now, without getting into whether everything that the government did was the right thing to do or not. We had a functioning government, and now I'm not convinced that we do. We've got a lot of turbulence, shall we say. As long as I'm doing the flying to California metaphor, we've been experiencing a lot of turbulence, to say the very least. And that's had an impact on our lives, your life, my life, and the lives of many people that we know. So I'm not sure where I was going with that, but that's a difference over the 3 years. Although we've been successful in building an audience and in making new friends and deepening our relationship, we haven't managed to meet our other mission, which was to save the world. So the world is still in need of saving.
Well, we're doing our best, which is all we can do right now concretely with the state of the country and the world. And also, as you were talking, I was thinking about one of the themes that has come up when we've talked together, and then when we've had guests talking, is one of the needs for us as we age is connection, community, reducing the experience of isolation. And so with the turbulence that's happening around us, to be able to, again, have conversations together and listen in on conversations to reduce that sense of isolation. I also was thinking, as far as the turbulence, there's a turbulence about aging and trying to navigate that and all of the things that come up externally, internally, medically, emotionally. And then we have this external turbulence all around us. So I feel like the reality of this podcast right now seems very timely for you and me personally, and then for all of the 8,000 plus people that tune in.
For me, our podcast has provided quite a bit of stability. Every couple of 3 weeks, I know where I'm going to be and I know what I'm going to be doing. And I know that I'm going to enjoy your company while we're doing it. I have learned a heck of a lot. When we first started doing this, I didn't have any clear idea at all about what equipment to get, how to use the internet to do this, how to do the editing. I get a raw sound file, and now what do I do? So I've learned a heck of a lot over this period of time about the technology and the mechanics of podcasting. That certainly has done me a lot of good. Maybe we should do an episode sometime on how do we do this anyway, and let people know what it looks like. Because I know when I had heard some podcasts before we started doing this, but I didn't really have any solid clue about what was involved in doing it. So maybe we should just do a quick episode sometime on how does this thing work anyway? Because I suspect that for some people, it's like magic. They get an email from us if they're on our mailing list. And having said that, I want to point out to people that if you want to be on our mailing list and learn about our podcasts as soon as we release them, you can sign up on our website. You can also leave comments on our website, which hasn't actually happened much yet. I've been wondering, what's the friction there? Why don't people leave comments? And some of it has to do with most people, I think, are listening to us while they're driving their car, and they're not likely to pull off the side of the road. And please don't try to leave a comment on our website while you're still driving. There's probably some of that, but I would say to anybody, if you've tried to leave or had an urge to leave a comment on one of our podcasts, go to our website when you got nothing better to do and send us a note. There's a couple of different ways that you can reach us, all of which have a button or a link on our website at www.oldish.me. So please reach out and connect with us if there's something. And before I forget, somebody asked me the other day, who had been listening to one of our book club meetings, wanted to know if it was interactive, if there was a way for us to do a book club interactively so that our audience could call in or text in or something to participate with us. And it turns out that the answer is yes. And I'm going to mess around with that a little bit in the next few weeks. And between now and the next time we do a book club, I'll make it so that works. And maybe sometime we'll even have a guest on and invite people to call in or join us and visit with our guest too.
That's very exciting. And I feel like we're kind of talking a little bit about some goals for the coming year. As far as you and I don't have a lot of control over this, but I'd love to see where we are a year from now around comments, suggestions, disagreements that people might write in. So I guess I'm putting that goal out there for all of you because that's a you thing. That's not an us thing. We're inviting you to go on our website and leave messages, and would love to see by the end of next year that kind of started rolling and that there are more than we've had so far. And then you talked about an interactive book club experience or an interactive with our listeners with a speaker. So that's something that's a us thing we can do. It's actually a you thing, Greg, as far as figuring out the technology. So that can be a goal for the coming year, is that by the end of next year, we'll have figured that out, that technology, and started to use that a few times at least.
That's a good goal for the year. Something else about it's not exactly technology that I wanted to throw out there to people is that for the first 2+ years, when we would talk with somebody about a book that they had written, or during our book club's discussions, we would talk about a book that somebody had written, and I would place a link on our website so that people could go to Amazon and find that book and buy it for their own uses. And we were Amazon affiliates, and somebody bought a book after clicking on that link, we would get a little commission. And we stopped doing that early this year for a number of reasons that I won't get into. But we now are recommending an online business called bookshop.org. We have our own bookstore on bookshop.org. You can get a link to that on our website. And one of the key things to that, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to make that change, was that Bookshop is supportive of independent bookstores. And they know that you might want to buy a book sometime and have it shipped to somebody, whether it's to yourself or for a gift or whatever else. And that's why I started going to Amazon. I just remembered it was so-and-so's birthday, and I wanted to send them a book. So how am I going to do that? Well, I went to Amazon, not the local bookstore. And I used to own a bookstore, and every time I did that, it would make me grind my teeth because that puts another nail in the coffin of the independent bookstores. So the way that bookshop.org works is if you buy a book after clicking on a link on our website, we get a small commission, just like we did with Amazon, which helps to support our podcast. We're not making any money, but it's not a bad idea to help us pay for the equipment and the services that we use. So feel free to chip in there. But also, Bookshop sends up to 30% of the cover price to an independent bookshop that you specify when you buy the book. So you can support your local bookstore while having the convenience of making an impulse purchase online in the middle of the night on a weekend. So that's a difference that's come up just in the last 3 months. So we're capable of change, which I think is the key characteristic of being oldish, is still able to change.
Yes. Greg, I'm glad you said that because I appreciate you and that you took the lead in helping us shift from Amazon to bookshop.com. And I love that we are trying to live what we're talking about as far as being able to change as we travel through this interesting time in all of our lives. You know, one thing that I found interesting about the interviews that we've had over time on this podcast, tell me if you feel this way. It feels like a number of the books were about sex, and a few of the books were completely by authors that completely wrote about sex after 60, for example. That was one of the titles. And then there were some books that were about Lose the Beige. That was Liz Kitchens, and in her book, which wasn't just about sex, but she included some talk about that. And I was just sitting here thinking, I wonder why that's true, that in our small comparison study that there are a number of books about the sexual experience for people as they age. And it does seem to be part of us as baby boomers trying to figure out what were the messages that were given to us from our previous generations, and is that who we are, who we think we are, who we want to be. And we obviously don't need to get into or rehash some of the things that were talked about, but I just wanted to kind of just acknowledge that this is something that we're doing in our podcast, is looking at everything that is presented as books, conversations, even things that seem like they were kind of set. This is the way it works. And our generation, baby boomers, are all about, maybe let's look at that. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's take a look at that. How does that work? The various episodes which had sex in the title add up to by far our most popular episodes. So apparently there's interest in the topic among people who are self-described as oldish. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that we were told growing up that when we were old, we weren't going to do it anymore. Our role models, our parents, maybe, our culture said, oh, old, there's a big U factor there. It's like old people ain't doing that. And one of the things that I know about our generation is it's not a good idea to tell us what we can't do because we're going to do it.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
I had a thought, Greg, as we wind down. I don't think you and I have ever asked each other, what are you afraid of? What are you excited about at this point in your life, in this moment? And I thought that might be interesting to do, maybe just once a year on our anniversary of the podcast. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a good idea. You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I'll go first since I suggested it. What am I excited about? I'm excited about the reality that we can do this differently, and that this aging experience, and that we, through this podcast, through books, through friends, through talking about it, through research, is showing what we need as we age. I'm excited about finding my own path of what it looks like for me to be oldish and to get older. What scares me is the unknowns of getting older, and they're unknowns on some level for all of us. And the interesting thing to me is that all of life is unknown, and all of life is impermanent, and all of life is about change, and all of life is about getting older, and all of life is about moving towards the end of our lives. But I realize that we also assume that we're going to live to be old, and we push it aside in some ways. And then here I am, I'm in my 70s, and I can't push it aside anymore. And so the reality that's always been there is much more conscious for me. So some of my fears include, what is that going to look like for me? And how much longer am I going to be alive? And how much longer during the time I'm alive will I be able to do a lot of the things that I like to do? And one of my biggest fears is, will I be able to hold on to joy and contentment as my body starts to fall apart and things change in those ways? So that's my response.
Huh. Well, I'll deal with the fear one first, because one of the benefits in my life of getting oldish is that many of the things that I was afraid of have fallen away. Some of them because they already happened to me, which I think is, by experience. I used to be really seriously afraid of heights until I went to Mount Everest, things like that. So I'm much less afraid of things than I used to be. And I'm pretty much most of the time feel like, I don't want to, well, this one is still from when my father's father died. I'm afraid of a slow, lingering, painful, pointless, meaningless, kept alive with tubes and wires and such end of life. So I'm kind of afraid of loss of control or loss of, I guess, quality of life at the end of life. But less so than I was when I was watching my grandfather go through that for various reasons, including that's less likely to happen now than it was back then. There are things like hospice has come along, and there was no hospice. My grandfather, as he was dying, the medical system was desperately trying to keep him alive at all costs. And that caused him a whole lot of unnecessary suffering. So I'm less afraid of that now than I used to be. I guess that's the fear part. What excites me is that every day is a new day. I wake up every day and, I'm oldish. So I wake up and I'm stiff and I'm sore and I'm cranky. And it's still the case that you shouldn't talk to me until the second or third cup of coffee. So that part hasn't changed. But I'm learning a lot every day, and I'm being more in the world every day than I used to be. And I'm learning some things. I'll wrap this up with just something that popped into my head the other day when I was talking to somebody. It was on the pickleball court, and it was between games. And I said to this guy that I sort of know, how are you doing? And he started complaining about he wasn't playing well, he was losing, and so on. And I said, well, one of the great things about being our age is that we have an opportunity to learn about the impermanence of loss. And I was real happy to have that pop in my head. That almost sounded deep. So
I like it.
Yeah.
We could have an episode about that.
Okay. Yeah, that works for me. I think it's because you read a lot of or listen to a lot of the stuff, and it's like, oh, yeah, the world is impermanent. And you're going to have to learn to let go of things. Well, you can let go of loss too. So impermanence of loss. So stuff is still popping into my head every once in a while that nobody is slapping me for. So I think that's good.
So we're up for another year of this, it sounds like.
I definitely am. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Yep.
Me too.
Good.
And I hope all of you that listen are too, because we're planning to be around for as long as we can and are able. And we'll continue to have a lot to talk about.
That's right. There you go. And folks, if you enjoy hanging out with us, and I know quite a few people do, please let your friends know and they can hang out with us too. So thanks for a great 3 years, Janet. And I'm looking forward to saying thanks for a great 4 years, just about a year from now.
Me too, Greg. Me too.
Okay. Bye, Janet.
Bye, Greg.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening. It's been an astonishing 3 years. We've had a great time and hope you have too. We're looking forward to an equally amazing 4th year. We have shifted our bookshop from Amazon to bookshop.org for a number of reasons. If you would like to purchase any books written by our guests or discussed on our book club episodes, please go to www.bookshop.org/shop/oldish. We will get a small commission on any books you purchase there to help keep Oldish going, and an independent bookstore of your choice will get up to 30% of the cover price. Win, win, win. You can leave comments or requests for topics or guests on this or other episodes at www.oldish.me. There's a link there too if you've wondered how you can help support our podcast. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.